All right, today we're diving into one of early Christianity's most, well, weirdest ideas. It's a heresy called Docetism, and it's all about this concept of a phantom messiah. I mean, just think about this for a second. What if Jesus, the person who walked the earth, did all those miracles, was crucified, what if he wasn't actually made of flesh and blood? What if his humanity, his suffering, his entire body was basically just a convincing special effect? That is the absolutely wild question at the very heart of Docetism. So, the name itself, Docetism, actually gives us a huge clue. It comes from this Greek word dokein, which means to seem or to appear. And that's it. That's the whole idea in a nutshell. The belief that Jesus Christ's physical body wasn't real at all. His humanity? Just an illusion, kind of like a divine hologram. Okay, so let's get into what these folks, who are sometimes called illusionists, actually believed about this phantom Jesus. The way they saw it, Christ only seemed to be a man. He only appeared to be born, to live his life, and to suffer on the cross. And, this meant they had to completely reject one of the most foundational lines in the Gospel of John. The Word was made flesh. For them, that just wasn't possible. It was a philosophical impossibility. Which, of course, brings up the big question, right? Why on earth would anyone believe something like this? Well, the answer gets into a whole philosophical worldview that looked at the physical world in a radically different way. To put it simply, it all came down to a deep, deep distrust of the material world. And we're not talking about just a casual dislike here. No, this was a core belief that all matter, and that includes the human body, was fundamentally flawed, maybe even evil. This whole distrust thing, it came from a bigger belief system you might have heard of called Gnosticism. For the Gnostics, the material world wasn't good. It was bad, evil even. And the human body, not a gift, but a prison trapping your pure spiritual soul. So for them, salvation wasn't about saving the body. It was all about escaping the body. And if you follow that logic, well, it leads to a pretty big conclusion. If a divine savior was going to come rescue humanity, there's just no way he would trap himself in a real, physical, and, in their view, evil body. And once you accept that core idea, boy, things can get pretty wild. You had thinkers like Simon Magus in the 1st century saying Christ's suffering just appeared to happen. Then you had a guy named Saturninus who claimed the savior was just a bodiless fantasy. But maybe the most extreme take came from Basilides. He taught that Jesus actually swapped places with Simon of Cyrene, the guy who helped him carry the cross, and then just stood on the sidelines and laughed while the wrong guy got crucified. I mean, wow. So you might be thinking this all sounds like some fringe philosophical debate for the history books, right? But for the early church, this was absolutely no small matter. This was a world-changing threat that struck at the very foundation of their entire faith. So why was it so serious? Because if you believe in a phantom Christ, you're tearing out the very heart of Christian salvation. Think about it. If Jesus wasn't truly human, then everything he did and everything Christians believed about him was suddenly thrown into question. So you've got these two totally competing visions of who Christ was. On the one hand, you have the docetic Christ. He's a phantom. His humanity, his suffering, it's all just for show, which means redemption is only symbolic. But then you have the Orthodox Christ, who is both fully human and fully God. He truly suffered, he truly died, and that makes redemption real. The entire idea of salvation literally hinged on which one you believed. And look, this wasn't just some abstract theological argument. For people at the time, this was a full-blown existential crisis. Just listen to this powerful quote from St. Ignatius of Antioch, writing way back around the year 110. He's essentially saying, hey, if Christ's suffering was just an act, then my own suffering for this faith is meaningless. These chains I'm in are pointless. I'm dying for nothing. You can just feel the raw desperation in his words. So, when you're faced with a belief that could make your entire faith meaningless, you don't just sit around and debate it. The early church leaders fought back, and they fought back hard. Their response was incredibly decisive. And let me tell you, they did not mince words. That same guy, St. Ignatius, he called the Docetists monsters in human shape and urged believers to flee from them as you would wild beasts. I mean, they saw this as a soul-killing doctrine, a poison that would destroy everything. Eventually, that response became official and systematic. First, the heresy gets formally condemned at the First Council of Nicaea in 325. But they didn't stop there. In 381, at the First Council of Constantinople, they went even further. They actually amended the Nicene Creed to specifically include the words that Jesus suffered death and was buried, which is a direct, crystal-clear shutdown of the whole idea that it was all just an illusion. So, case closed, right? Well, not exactly. Did this ancient idea ever really disappear? The specific sect of Docetism, yeah, it faded away. But that core idea, that deep distrust of the material world, man, that continues to echo right down through history, even into our world today. You can actually find traces of this kind of thinking in all sorts of places. It pops up in some modern esoteric and spiritist circles, or in any philosophy that pushes a kind of disembodied spirituality, where the spirit is everything and the flesh is nothing. The idea was even influential enough to affect how some early Muslim scholars interpreted the Quran's account of the crucifixion. There's even a more subtle, modern version that some people call semi-Docetism. Now, this isn't about denying Christ had a body, it's more about saying that certain parts of his physical humanity don't really have any theological importance. It's just another way of downplaying the full reality of the Incarnation, kind of suggesting that the flesh part doesn't matter in all its messy details. When you get right down to it, the fundamental flaw of Docetism is kind of like trying to build a bridge to God using flimsy ropes instead of solid stone piers. By denying the physical reality of Christ, they were creating a connection that was just, well, it was flimsy, it was unreliable, it could never bear the weight of real salvation. So you see, defeating Docetism was about so much more than just winning a theological argument. It was a powerful affirmation that creation and the human body are actually good. It made sure that physical things, like the sacraments, the Eucharist, were real, not just empty symbols. It's what makes Christ's death truly redemptive. And maybe most importantly, it laid the foundation for the ultimate promise of Christianity, the resurrection of our own bodies. And all of this leaves us with one final thought to chew on. This ancient tension, this push and pull between the spiritual and the physical, it's still very much with us. So the question is, where do we, in our own lives, in our own culture today, still see the spirit being valued more than the flesh?